these credible individuals. This is like from Kansas right. People that even knew what these things were called. In the early 1900s, this was going on. You have this story in Zimbabwe of the aerial school, where I made of it, where 60 children, black and white, at this interracial school, something landed near their school, rising up, and thought at them. What a fascinating story. A psychiatrist from Harvard, John Mack, went and interviewed them. And he's a specialist in child psychiatry. And said these children are lying. They ran into the school.
That's liberating. I definitely am.
Told the teachers came out, teachers didn't say anything, but then the kids drew what they saw. The stories all corroborated. And these are like 6 or 10-year-old kids. Yeah. Who just don't have it in them to lie like that. And the movie is actually, happened around, I think, 1990 or something. 30 years later, go back to these kids, they're not very young, and they say, it happened, it changed my life.
This raises another series of very important meta questions about science. And the questions that I have in mind here are how we're supposed to establish the reputability of a witness, and how we should factor that into our evidence. Surely the huge volume is something that we really need to take into account here. But when evaluating a single case, you mentioned that you've had some more recent UAP experiences. Maybe we'll talk a bit about those later. But first, you mentioned at the outset of our interview that as a paper boy, you had a UAP experience. And I think now might be an interesting time to hear about that experience.
Right.
And then I'll follow up on this.
Right. So, I was probably 12 years or so old, circa 1970-something, 74 or so. It was early morning, and I had to get a paper to this one guy at the end of the street that I lived on, Sheffield Drive. And between his house and the next street I needed to go to was sort of a little copse of woods. But I needed to get the paper there by 5:30 because he needed it by 5:30. I didn't get it by 5:30. So I know. And then it was probably March or so, because back then, the snow was kind of, it wasn't lots of snow. I was walking through the woods. This area always kind of scares me, but I was walking through the woods, and then I noticed my shadow in front of me, and the branches and the trees, and then the shadows were moving like that, suddenly they're coming close, and I realized and I looked up, and this object went right over the top of the trees. I didn't know what it was. I still don't know what it was, except it couldn't have been a blimp, because if it were a blimp or any kind of airship, I lived in a hilly region. It would have crashed. I don't know where it was. And so, and it wasn't until literally decades later when I kind of became aware of UFOs and the zeitgeist of pop culture that I looked back and said, was that what I saw? It was the lights, and it was kind of, you could kind of see the shadow of it against the sky. It's an anecdote, but it is not explainable. It was totally silent. Totally silent. Didn't stop. Nobody got out. I didn't have any missing time or anything like that. But it was enough to solidify in my mind later that these are the kinds of events that people have. Mine are nowhere near as dramatic as a lot of what other people claim. But it solidified that it needs an explanation. And so that's part of what drives me is like, I don't need anybody else to validate what I saw. And I don't need anybody else to validate why I should be asking the question. So let's just do it. And, you know, but then I come across people who had much more, you know, personal contact with objects or things or collections, etc. And so I just collect the stories. But, you know, I don't have to be the one collecting the stories. You've seen that book, some of the ones that I gave you. But then there's like books by Jacques Vallée or Richard Dolan. Richard Dolan is a fantastic historian. Just wrote a whole, writing a series of books on USOs, on identified submerged objects. And he goes, he takes hundreds of stories that have been collected over the decades. He's done all the nitty-gritty research, details each of them. But he's a fantastic writer, so he interweaves with his own kind of humor and writing, so it's an engaging read. It's not just a read of facts. Then there's Jacques Vallée, who wrote a book called Wonders in the Sky.
Esta é a app do futuro, que lhe dá acesso a oportunidades de investimento em ações e ETFs, para que o seu dinheiro não fique parado. E tudo a partir do seu bolso.
Hi, my name is Leon Malsub. I'm a developer advocate here at Zencoder, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create custom agents with their own names, instructions, and tool calls, and then share those custom agents with the whole team. Let's start by opening up Zencoder and navigating to the Agents menu. From here, we can see all of our agents, including Zencoder official agents, as well as our own custom agents. Let's go ahead and create a new accessibility agent. Give it a name, and make it shareable.
Let's fucking go.
Next, we'll define a
So the person that said I was trash, you're trash. I just won, you motherfucker. Free Palestine. Iran has the right to defend itself. 7 wins. Let's fucking go.
We'll define the tools the agent can use from a simple drop-down menu.
This one's going on YouTube. Free Palestine.
We'll hit